Yeah, yeah, the natural.
right? But it's very limited because it's hard to get normally, depending on where you live.
Depending on where you live, if you're in a climate that has tons of fruits hanging from the trees,
Right.
you're probably eating more of them, and your body will be more accustomed to it.
Right. All right, I started the video. So I know the audio is not great on there, and I got this system installed that's supposed to make it better, right? So there's a speaker, there's a speaker, there's a speaker.
So yeah, last what was it, a day or two ago, man,
Or a microphone.
it was really buggy. You couldn't,
Yeah,
unless you turned the volume up and listened closely, it was difficult to listen to.
it's not the greatest thing.
Yeah.
So we paid a decent penny for it because it was supposed to be better, you know? And like I know at the time we were having it installed too, they were having trouble getting chips, so they couldn't get certain parts. All of that deal.
Probably coming from China.
I'm guessing Taiwan probably, where all the other chips come from, which I think is going to lose its independence in 2024. So,
Some crazy developments right now.
all right. So this is just this meeting back last time, but I had finance reports in there. There's the budget from this year. There's the meeting coming up on Friday, just in case we wanted to reference anything. We don't have to, but then we don't have to run for it.
Okay.
And so we can talk about whatever. We can talk about everything. So what we're going to specifically talk about money and finances and that type of thing. And so I think two things I want to hit on right off the bat. The one, and I watched your one YouTube video about the COVID money. All right, and there were two aspects of COVID money: the CARES Act that came through for Trump and the ARPA Act that came through for under Biden.
But they were both basically created because of the same issue.
To placate the people and try to like brace up the economy falsely while they turned everyone away from being able to work for the most part, right? Weird, screwy things.
A reward system for compliance.
Yes. So what I didn't like in there, right, was that you called it hush money.
Well,
And so what I want to clarify, do you think there's anything that I've been giving money on for being hushed? Because I heavily disagree.
yeah, I use that term, hush money. I just use the term compliance to, it's like giving money for a deed well done, right? Whether or not you agreed with the deed in doing it, but you knew if you did it, you would reap a reward. And and in this instance, in regards to the COVID, that you wouldn't bring condemnation or something coming back to you that you or me might fear as a consequence to not going along, right? And you being in a governmental office, you're even closer to the subject.
Yeah, but there's nothing that I can't say, right? So that's my point. That's the problem I have with calling it like hush money, like I'm hush, right? So my perspective on COVID, I had students in China when COVID started breaking out. I had students in Wuhan, right?
Yeah.
And so, which was so interesting because they were masking up and locking down. And I was like, wow, it's very interesting to see different cultures react because the United States would never react like that.
Well, some cultures had a propensity to do that anyway.
How wrong I was, right? How wrong I was.
Yeah, right.
So highly overestimated the American people. So my perspective on that is that, and I read the 2015 article that came out in Nature magazine that explicitly states they were taking coronavirus from bats at the Wuhan virus lab with funding from China and funding from the United States, working with American universities to do gain of function research.
North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Yes, correct. I believe there was one other one too. And so to take coronavirus that couldn't infect and kill humans and make it infect and kill human cells.
A bioweapon.
Just to see if they can do it.
Oh.
Which we both know means you're just making a bioweapon, right?
You're planning.
And in 2015, they published in Nature magazine, major scientific magazine, that they successfully did. right? So the United States and China, which I find this out, are working on bioweapons together. And then that either leaked or was purposely released by either a major player or a minor player at the time in Wuhan. I think it was probably planned to be used later, but then the issues, right, the things that were happening in Hong Kong, because I had students there too, the things that were happening in Hong Kong with no one supporting them were spreading to the mainland. Now, I've never heard anyone talk about this, but they were getting major protests at universities on the mainland throughout China right when they locked down.
They were. There were those people were on the streets already.
Correct.
It was because the term of their independence was being called.
Because they have a decent amount of economic freedom without political freedom.
Well, and the gig was up,
Right.
right? China was going to come back and take over at the end of the agreement that they had with England.
Well, they did. They took over.
Yeah. And so,
I wrote 2 articles.
the Taiwanese were revolting because they didn't want to go back into that underneath that authority.
Well, and Taiwan is not yet, but I think that's going to happen next year during our
You got to be
elections.
careful how they go about doing that, right?
Yes, they need to strike at the right moment, which is what they're waiting.
China?
China,
Well,
which is what they're waiting.
I don't support that side of the scenario,
Oh, I'm against China.
you know, but you just put yourself into their mindset. You have to
Correct.
strike at just the right
Correct.
moment.
Because
right?
you have to be able to take their mindset to figure out what they're going to do. And in their best interest is when we're our weakest during this election in 2024, that's not going to go up. And whichever side is losing is going to call an illegitimate election.
And
For certain in the general election, maybe in the primaries as well.
and
Right there somewhere, if they strike at the right moment,
Yeah.
they probably won't get very much resistance. Although we might go into a proxy war, which if we win, the United States stays dominant in the world and China doesn't. If we lose, then the United States becomes a secondary country like Europe is now. But my point on saying all of that,
'cause I got to back you up.
but my point on saying all of that is there is no hush money, right? Like this is going on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And so there's nothing restricting me.
Well, that's a matter of opinion because some people wouldn't see that at all. They would say, no, this was needed. We had to boost the economy, you know, because everybody had been locked down and shut in and small businesses were losing their pants, you know.
Correct.
Well,
But
well,
that still doesn't make it hush
small
money.
businesses haven't even come back into the economy.
Oh,
Many
yes.
of them are gone
The
forever.
lockdowns were dead.
But I got to back up. So you gave your perception of what happened
Correct.
through some factual information.
Yeah.
Right? In your studies.
Yeah.
That's what I appreciate about you, buddy. Is you just don't parrot what others are saying. You do your own research. I really like that.
Yeah.
You're a historian, you're a smart man. I do like that. So I did that as well. I did my own study. And, you know, the only difference between you and I would say, from what I know, is I'm a born again Christian.
Correct.
I have surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. And when I did that, God sent his spirit to live inside of me and direct and guide my life and change my life forever. So I have someone on my side that I believe I have on my side that I
Yeah.
listen to.
Yeah.
Okay. So when all this first happened, you know, it was in Italy first. Kind of, they said Wuhan, China, but then quickly, within a week or two,
Quickly, it was in
it was in Italy. And then so I was sitting back like everybody else. Well, is this or isn't this? And a lot of people were running scared right off the bat. And I said to myself, no, I don't live by fear. Okay, my life isn't directed by fear. You know, God took that from me. I fear the Lord, but I don't fear men or what they can do to my body. So I'm sitting back waiting, and I had a lot of Christian friends who I thought, well, they could sort this out as well as I could because we were listening to the same God.
Yeah.
And so 2 weeks into it in Italy, they had a video running of an emergency scenario where it was just awful and it was overrun and everything else. Well, within a week, it's here in America. It's in New York City, and the same video that they ran in
They
Italy,
played the same video.
they were playing the same video saying it was now New York City.
Yep.
And then guys started to go down into New York City and they were blogging and they were filming and they were saying, well, here's what the government's telling us, but here's the reality. So it was just lie after lie after lie after lie. If you weren't a person sitting home just watching the boob tube, the scrying mirror, the black scrying mirror that you're looking into, and they're telling you everything and how you need to live your life and what you need to do next and what drugs to take,
Yeah.
So I'm not that guy. We don't hardly have that on at all. And I'm doing my own research. So what a learning curve. In those 2 years, I did more research into the body and health and looked at what I found to be reliable, legitimate sources, educated people, doctors, and so forth, that were not in agreement with what was coming down the pipe.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I got to the point where I understood that our body, twice a year, releases its own solvents, this perfect immune system that God has put inside of us. It's a cleansing process. It detoxifies our body. Isn't that amazing? God designed it that way, that twice a year, in this climate, in the spring, right after winter, people get what they always put a name on something, right? So that they can diagnose it and medicate it.
Yeah.
Pfizer. Well, so we get what we call the cold or a flu. Well, that's your body detoxing. It's done it itself. And it's not some airborne crap that you're ingesting, because that was proven to be nonsense. And I won't go into the details because I don't have them right in front of me.
Yep.
But it was proven way back. They had taken spittle and so forth, people that had these symptoms, right? And ingested them and injected them and coughed on people and so forth. All this nonsense that was over here had no effect on that individual. So this is not airborne. So it's our body's natural reaction to detox and help us get rid of the crap, because we eat a lot of crap.
Mm-hmm.
We're in environments that are toxic to us, right? Maybe a manufacturing environment or something like that. But then they had to have the proof positive, the convincer, the thing that would tell people, oh, you have it,
Yep.
which was the PCR test. Well, Kerry Mullins made his own video before he died, shortly after the video was made. He was the inventor of the PCR test. And he said they cannot use it in the way that they're using it. He says it was just to help identify DNA or RNA structure. And he said that if you magnify this test far enough, you can find anything. Okay?
Yeah.
Not a specific test, and it certainly is not designed for the purpose they were using it for. So that was their way of convincing people you got it.
Well, there's a lot of screwy stuff there. My point is that the ARPA funds haven't restricted me from saying anything. Right? There's no
To a degree, because you know there was.
What would I
you know
not
there-
say?
Well, no, okay, then I would agree. As far as your freedom of speech is concerned.
Right. Now, I have different opinions than you on things, but I had those before ARPA funds existed.
Be honest with me, would you ever have a reservation in regards to saying anything, knowing full well that it's being recorded? Okay, because I've had interactions, even in this room, with another politician who's come in here
Sure.
and sat in our audience, and I asked him a question directly, and he would not answer directly until after the meeting. He said, I'll talk to you after the meeting. Which means to me, he didn't want to say it on record.
If I wouldn't do it on video, I wouldn't have these videos.
Well,
I wouldn't have to do this.
That is another thing I appreciate about you,
Right.
individual.
I'm like just,
You're kind of you're kind of outside of the normal a little bit.
I never had anyone tell me I'm inside of the norm.
Well, there.
Right? So
There's probably a lot of ways to describe it, but I appreciate that. I do.
I think it's part of my idealism, which is dying with this job. But it's part of my idealism that the conversation, the open conversation is important.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And goodness can come out of it.
Yeah.
And you need it.
We can't be afraid to talk about anything.
It's kind of the foundation.
Or get offended by
It's
it.
kind of the foundation of America.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like the freedom of
It's a
speech.
meeting place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I highly agree with it, right? It's part of my ideological stance of have the conversation. See how it goes, you agree, you disagree, whatever. Right? At least have the conversation.
Right.
And I went radical transparent quite a number of years ago. So like all my people are really iffy about like medical imaging and stuff like that. I've got spinal deformities. I've had a bunch of issues with it. And like I posted all my x-rays and stuff. They're online. They're on my website.
Okay.
Right. And so now I think
That's totally transparent.
yeah, and I think I went too far in the transparency direction. But it's good, right? Because you have to like push that limit and then you're like, okay, like I probably shouldn't say some stuff that I know about other people, right? Some of that type of stuff, like pull back, right?
Right.
But there's a good balance. I think most people could probably go in the direction of being more transparent, right? And so,
Most off.
but with this stuff especially, it's like the political.
If you're going to do that, you can't be concerned about other people's opinions or having the favor of others.
Correct. It doesn't work out very good
No,
because people are going to hate you.
no, because you're going
It's not the way it
to tell her what you say to make it sound like something that's acceptable to them.
Well, and I don't even think that largely works because no matter what you
It
say,
doesn't work because then you're miserable.
Well,
and you're a liar. And
you-
you're not telling the truth.
and you're not sincere,
Right.
right? And then I think you'll kind of fall apart. Or I think I probably would, right? So there's con men that can probably do it just fine, right?
In perpetual lying,
Right.
it's a spirit. One, it's a spirit, and then those that we've encountered in our own personal lives, it's quite amazing.
But I think it kind of eats
Because a
itself.
lot of it's believable, but it comes so often that all of a sudden you're realizing, hold it.
Right. So you might as well have the sincere conversation.
Yeah.
And what comes of it comes of it. Right? That's kind of my philosophy, which is odd.
Right.
In a large part, I wrote that article. You might have read it on my perspective on deception in politics, which came up with like 5 reasons. Something I've wondered about, read about, and stuff. And corruption in politics. I wrote an article on that too. On the articles I've written for the Beacon, but a huge amount of like the covering up and stuff in politics is not so nefarious. There's nefarious stuff, right? But a lot of it is just fear. A lot of it is just fear of people are going to criticize me. I messed something up, whatever.
I would say
Right.
more on the local spectrum of
For
government.
sure, on the local, my guess, as far as I can tell, and obviously I've operated at the higher echelons, but from the Village of Lakewood Club, which is about as small a municipality as you can get,
Right.
all the way through the international organizations, it's largely the same. Okay,
Well, but you don't hang out on Epstein Island.
that is true. That is true, but that doesn't mean
You don't go to Donald Trump parties.
that's true. But that doesn't mean there aren't similar versions of it, smaller locally. So I think it's because it's people. It's
Well,
people.
if people,
From the small all the way to the big, you have similar people because humans have human nature.
traits,
Right.
sinful natures,
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
want
Original sin.
to be in control,
And I mean,
which is witchcraft. See, they don't know that. That's a spiritual
you know that
issue.
you know that I'm not religious. We have a separation on the religion thing,
Yeah, but I'm praying for you.
which I appreciate. But original sin is a solid doctrine, right? I mean, I would probably phrase it in different ways and whatnot, but it's solid.
Yeah. Well, let's go.
My experience supports it more and more.
Let's go. Just touch base on the financial thing
Yeah.
here in our community. And like I said in the meeting yesterday, I'll start out by saying I look at government employees or individuals, and depending on their role, but certainly a supervisor's role and a trustee's role, a clerk's role, in 3 ways. You're here to maintain things. You're just here to make sure the building keeps running, the lights stay on, bills get paid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're able to do all of that, then you're accomplished in your goal. That was your motivation to begin with. The other individual would be the one who's saying, I want to improve things. And they don't necessarily say to themselves, no matter what it takes. But if they see opportunity, they'll take it. And that's where I would place the ARPA funds. Because opportunity is knocking, we'd be stupid not to take the funding. And because it's being offered to us. And the majority of the community would probably agree. I don't agree, because I shared with you guys that it was corrupted money from the beginning, and if you take it, you'll bring the corruption into our community just by association.
We had the talk on that.
And then so the last motivation that I see is really God inspired, community inspired, truthfully, is because we've been taxed so highly, above our eyebrows, like I say. We left England for 10% tax. And now we're taxed so over 50%. We could work some numbers and come up with a percentage, but we know where it's at.
It's a huge amount because it's taxed on everything.
Huge amount. And we have to cut. We have no choice. Who's going to do it if we don't do it? Who's going to be the one to say, enough is enough? You know what? We have to actively find ways to cut. And as a matter of fact, I would say the person that comes into this supervisory position comes in running on a platform that first year I'm going to cut $200 from everybody's property tax. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but we're going to do it. All right. And
I have a problem with the politicians that do that because you can sell that all day. So there's several things.
no, this is not selling. This is
No, that's selling.
No, this is absolute.
When you're
This is
running
because
for
you-
office,
you
the
will-
campaign is a sales campaign.
Well, but that's the purity of your heart, not the deception of your heart.
But you're saying,
Yeah,
I don't know.
You're
how
not
I'm
doing
going
that
do
to
it.
get. You're not doing that to get the job. Yeah, you would be doing that.
You are doing it.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
You don't even know how you're going to do it. It's a bad plan. So there's several things that I think are a little off.
Well,
You're-
having looked. And you say
Your motivations, I think, are a little simplified.
If you had, well, and I tend to.
Well, and it is.
I tend to be that
And we
way.
need frameworks to simplify it,
I will oversimplify things.
but it's focused on finances, right, exclusively versus other things.
Where's your camera?
And then there.
Right there?
Yeah, you can hold it up closer.
Yeah. Good.
So, but then the other aspect of that is that you're leaving out other motivations that are in there and different aspects.
Like what?
So one, like a lot of people take the positions to have a job.
I don't know if this can actually be seen.
I think it's decent.
Okay, this is a pie chart for Dalton Township. I made this myself at home. These numbers came off of our most current property tax bill. There are 12 categories on that bill. And what I'm showing here in these three large categories, 75% of what we pay in our taxes goes directly to schools. This is school debt. This is 22%. That's the intermediate school district. And this portion down here is MCC. Did you know that? Did you know that 75% of your property taxes are going to these entities? And maybe you're like me, and you're saying to yourself, I'm retired, I don't have children in school, one. I certainly, as a man of God, I don't agree with what they're teaching in the public school systems. They've been dumbing it down most of my lifetime. They want us to think we're getting more intelligent. If you look back in the early 1900s and late 1800s,
IQs are going down now.
IQs are going down.
That's
And
probably a health issue.
they're teaching our children things. Boys can be girls, girls can be boys. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want my money going to those bodies. And
We're in
as
the
a matter
wrong
of fact,
entity.
huh?
We're in the wrong entity to change that. I can't change school taxes.
Well, what do you mean you're in the wrong entity? You're the ones that impose it upon us.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Don't you represent the local, the county government and the state government? Aren't you a representation of that here in this township?
Yeah, the state creates the local governments.
Then you're representing the entity that is imposing this tax upon us.
But you can just say everyone in government is that thing. I can't change it.
Yes, you can.
No, I can't.
Yes.
How? It's not a thing.
I talked to Timothy Mann.
I can't just write down, you know what, this year let's not do school taxes. Oh, there we go.
Well,
That's not a thing. That's imaginary.
well, no, it's not.
It's imaginary.
No, because at
I don't have the power, and you don't want me to have that power.
any point in the game, like, you and I shared the book, The Bag, or
Yeah. Well, you can go to war.
a lesser magistrate. Well, there's a lot of aspects of war. Right?
War is always an option.
War, but there's when
That's what
when,
Magdeburg is.
well, but when you say war, you say people are thinking this.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Taking a stand and then being willing to shoot other people because of it. Ultimate. But there's many other aspects to war, and we're watching our government pull it on us right now. There's a war going on against our lives, but it's not necessarily with this. Although in Maui, what just happened
Well,
was potentially
there's a bunch of other aspects.
some of that.
Yeah, I haven't really paid attention to that.
Well,
I
I
know there's a bunch of fires.
I have.
But my point is, so so in my role, if I just say, you know what, I don't accept the authority of anyone other than me, right? Declare myself king, whatever.
Oh, that's not what we're talking
Do
about.
my own thing.
Because
Ignore all laws.
my authority comes from God.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but if you do that, this is why I want you to do it. Like, go for it. Right? I disagree with that. I think it's a horrible plan to take this role and then say, you know what? I don't recognize the state of Michigan. I don't recognize the United States.
I'm not saying that.
That's what you're saying. The laws are in place
What
that
I-
say there are school taxes.
Well, then you fight against that. How do you fight against that? That's the question. How would you? How would we fight against that?
This isn't that entity.
Well, one way we could do that is we could make it public.
We are.
There you go.
So we can talk about it.
We're fighting tonight.
We can talk about it, yes. Right?
We don't agree with what they're doing.
I think our tax structure at every level is very weird and not very good. Right?
It's overbearing.
It's overbearing. So I do have issues with it though, right? So I disagree with taxes to a huge extent. I like Henry George from the late 1800s on property taxes, but that's all.
Well, you know how we were taxed originally as a country.
Well, but
Import only, no income.
correct. Right? And
Right.
so, the 1913, right, when they instituted the Fed and
That's where it all went sour.
the income tax, right? That was a constitutional amendment.
16th Amendment
And the
changed in the middle of the night,
and the direct election of federal senators.
putting lawyers into political seats.
All three of those things were rough. Lawyers were always in political seats.
Well, not necessarily. They were not supposed to be.
Thomas Jefferson,
they were not
John
supposed-
Adams,
they-
these people were lawyers.
They were not supposed to
That's
be
what they were
in
as
those
lawyers.
positions.
A lot of the founding fathers were lawyers.
Not according to the original documents. They were not then lawfully installed in those positions.
The
Because
Revolution,
according to the 16th Amendment, you couldn't be. There was a conflict of interest. Because primarily because a lawyer has a bar association. And you know where the bar is? That's right, it's in England. And come in, can you imagine that? You put a compatriot to England in your political structure as a leader.
Well, the founding fathers.
That's why they were smart.
The founding fathers were British. They were British.
But they had left Britain.
When
They
they
had-
had a war.
Well, and there's another whole dichotomy there.
If you want to leave a government, you have to do it through war, or the other side has to capitulate.
They were British.
Right.
They were British at that point only by upbringing and having lived in that country.
Right. The same way
they-
everyone else. The same way we're Americans.
They
were British.
left, broke ties completely. You can't call them British. They would have called
British.
themselves what?
Colonials.
Colonials.
Well,
They would no longer were
They would have
associated.
referenced themselves by their state. So Jefferson was a Virginian. John Adams was from
The last thing they would want to do is say they were British because they were at war with Britain.
No, that is not how that war went. For years,
All right.
years and years and years, they stayed part of the British Empire and tried to stay part of the British Empire.
Well, that is true. But all right, let's go back to the taxation issue.
Yeah, let's go back.
If you're going to separate yourself
Because it wasn't because
from a country
it wasn't because of the amount
of taxation without representation,
without representation.
you no longer create your affiliation association with that group because they're the ones that are the oppressors. You now
It was
now,
taxation
but
without representation.
Here's
People here have tons of representation.
here's
They're
where,
probably overrepresented.
here's where I agree with you, and I know you're right on your facts. Okay, in regards to these individuals, there were two factions here when this country was created. Probably more,
I would say.
but there were two main factions, and it's the perpetual thing that goes back to the Garden of Eden.
The Patriots and the Loyalists.
And the loyalists or the pilgrims
Oh, if you go older, sure. Yep.
and the God-fearing people came here, as well as those that were sent by Queen Elizabeth, Francis Bacon, John Dee, and the whole society who funded. It's always the funding that brings the corruption. They settled
The corruption is
Jamestown.
in people.
Not all.
Original sin.
Once you're born again, God deals with that. All right.
I don't think you become a perfect person. I've never seen it.
You don't become a perfect person, but the thing is, you're in agreement with God. All right, and His ways, which are holy and righteous and good. All right, and you have the Spirit of God inside of you doing the work. Now we know as Christians, we are completely sanctified. Once we're born again, we're completely sanctified in God's eyes. We've been made pure by the blood of Jesus and His sacrifice for our sins. We still have an evil nature that we're having to deal with, like you said.
Yeah.
Okay. But this other aspect of us is totally, completely born again, brand new, 180 degrees opposed to this nature.
Maybe an aspect.
No, in
I'm
truth.
fine with that.
In truth.
But not the whole person, for sure.
Well, so there you have that dichotomy. Same thing we're talking about here in the foundation of our
But
country.
there were, so like the Mayflower, right?
Yeah.
Coming across the Mayflower,
Puritans was the word I was looking for.
there was two major groups. One is the Puritans,
Mhm.
right? And the other one were called strangers by the Puritans.
I remember you sharing this with me.
Yeah, because they were, so they
Because
were.
you had one in each side of your
Yes, I have
family.
ancestors on both. I'm a stranger and a Puritan.
So,
I'm a strange Puritan. Right? And so, but they were largely adventurers, right? They were people down in their luck. They were people that were willing to take a risk. They were people, right? They're frontiers people.
I would say all of them.
Well, right, largely all of them.
Because they were going to sail off the edge of the earth, right?
Right.
Well,
They
you know,
were
that-
sailing to an unknown entity.
You know that's being resurrected, right?
What, the flat earth stuff? I disagree with the flat earth stuff. But I've known a number of people that believe in it.
And some educated people
Yes. Yes.
that look into things and question things and just don't accept things verbatim. that had poured into their head like a receptacle. You know,
Oh,
I got you off the track.
I think it's a react. I think that type of thing is a reactionary thing. I wrote an article on it.
On what?
Flat Earth, Truth, and Conspiracy, something like that is the
Yeah,
title.
we're jumping all over the joint.
So yeah, we are usually my conversations too. So that must be the strangeness rather than the piercing, right? But
Well, we spur thoughts in one another.
Yeah.
See that conversation,
Yes.
and that's stimulating.
But so there were those two groups, and they tried a communist aspect at first of sharing everything, right? That's part of human nature.
Yeah.
It didn't work, and then they ended up doing a private property type of setup, and it ended up working better and all of that type of stuff. So, but there are all these different groups, but then there are other factions that mix, right? The United States ends up being a decent mix of
Well, that was their claim to fame, the melting pot.
yes, but a lot of cultures are historically. I mean, what else can you consider Rome? Right? I mean, it's a huge melting pot,
Yeah,
right? In a bunch of cultures, and especially as you expand and conquer
yeah.
other
It
societies
was a massive geographical operation.
with significantly different people, right? I mean, they control parts of the Middle East, parts of Europe, parts of Africa, right? So
Yeah.
bunch and so there are these melting pots that come across, but the United States has been one of them. But there was also a decent amount of similarity in history to the cultures that were coming across. I mean, they were almost exclusively European, right? And so you have that type of influence. But there are these different groups. But some of the stuff, like, so the revolution, right? It wasn't just the amount of tax, right? So the 10% isn't actually very important. No taxation without representation. Representation was the key. That's why Benjamin Franklin was hired by multiple states to negotiate with the British to try to get representation.
I would beg to differ in that it wasn't important to them. It was extremely important to them, the level of taxation.
The level of taxation, I think, has always been important to people throughout all of history.
Yeah.
But the key piece of why do you go to war? Is it because you're getting taxed at 5% or 10%? No.
There are
Right.
other reasons for sure.
That's the representation thing. I think if the British would have allowed one spot in their parliament for representation from the American colonies, then there wouldn't have been a war.
It would have been a token gesture, and I think the men at that time were smart enough to realize that. Is that
I think it would have placated the people enough.
that's probably true. Although back
The
then,
British would still have their empire.
they had principles to stand upon where they were willing to fight.
People have principles now, and then they do.
Hey,
They do. Now,
but
it fluctuates, the principles fluctuate, and how strong they are fluctuating people.
I don't see people standing up to fight.
We're having little wars in the United States right now. The BLM riots are a version of war.
That's propagandized.
Autonomous-
They are being backed by money, big money. They're being backed by big money.
That's an aspect of war.
That's a little
You don't have war without money.
that's a little chaotic operation to keep
The
people.
autonomous zones that have been formed in little cities, like there was one in Portland and whatnot,
Yeah.
that is forming your own little micronation, taking a section and saying, we control this.
Well, some of that is reasonable.
But that's what I'm saying, is it's people standing up strongly,
There are
right?
some.
Saying, I'm willing to kill or be killed.
There are some, but we watched, going back to the whole COVID debacle, we watched what happened to people. They laid down.
They did.
They didn't even try to become informed.
Much more than I thought they would.
They just rolled over. And look at your military now.
Yes.
Look what's happening there. Yeah, this is a very controversial
The
topic.
United
isn't it?
States is weak,
And why?
but we're
You're afraid to say it.
No, I'm not.
All
I'm
right.
afraid to say what? Tell me what I'm afraid to say.
You know what I'm getting at. You have homosexuals
Oh, the gender thing?
in the military.
The-
They're weak. I have fellows that fought in Nam, buddies that fought in Nam.
Yeah.
And they're looking at what's going on with this current
The gender
military.
thing is
this-
part of the society going insane.
That I agree with. That is a mental illness, and until the 70s, it was considered a mental illness. It was diagnosed as
It's a
mental illness.
it's-
Oh well, society could
it's a
change.
late stage empire thing.
No, society only is coerced and forced into going in a certain
But
direction.
it's not.
It
It's
doesn't make it any different.
It's not fully just a grand plot of a few plotters. It's part of a natural process
Well,
of people becoming warped, right? So you can do it in rats. Have you ever heard of John B. Calhoun and his rat universes?
no.
Amazing research. It tracks with this perfectly, right? So his research is largely from the 1960s through to the 1980s, right in there. And his perspective on why this stuff happens changed a bit over that time. And eventually he comes up with the idea of the loss of a meaningful role in the society, which just tracks right on, right? I mean, you go ask people how meaningful their lives are. Nothing, right? That's why people are on drugs and suicide rates are huge. And so, which is why, I mean, just for personal reasons, starting out when I was young, when I was 13, I started pursuing what is the meaning of life? Let me understand this thing for a while, right?
Young and idealistic.
And so, well, I was emotionally driven because I had a best friend that died, got ran over at a bus stop. And it was a very traumatizing incident for me and collapsed the community around me. And so I was just left floundering, right, emotionally, mentally.
Now, why did this happen?
Why did the hit happen?
You were probably asking yourself, why did this happen?
Oh, correct. Yes, all that. Well, and I thought about suicide and I thought about brainwashing. And I determined that I would, instead of
Brainwashing in what regard?
Soviet brainwashing manuals I'd come across. I still did a lot of reading when I was a kid. All right.
All right.
A lot of weird stuff.
So
So
did Barack Obama.
I think, did you compare me to Barack before?
With his friend Frank Harris.
I feel like you're the only person that's ever compared me to Barack Obama. But
I'm not making that necessarily making that comparison
but
because I happen to believe he's the Antichrist. So anyway, go ahead.
so I determined to pursue understanding the meaning of life before I do one of those things, right? So I ended up, it was hugely emotionally driven, which is why I know the things that I know, right? And it's why you read thousands of books looking for the answers about life, right? Otherwise, why would you do that? It's kind of an insane.
Well, and reading books is awesome.
It's important, but it's important to balance it out with life experience,
Right.
right? If you get lost,
It can't be a recluse.
right? Or otherwise, you won't really understand.
Yeah, and yeah, you have to test that against
Correct.
real life.
Yeah. And so, but all of that, I was going somewhere with that.
Well, when you were young and you were looking for the answers,
Yep.
and your friend had died.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the background to something I was going to in the foreground, but I can't remember what was happening right before that. Rats. The rats. So John B. Calhoun, right? So he would set up these experiments. He called them rat universes, and they would experiments that would run for years. And so he'd set up a space that was large enough for a lot of rats to grow in it, provide all the bedding, food, water, right, all the space that they need, everything they need to be healthy. You can calculate how large of a population they should be able to grow up to, right? They would never get there. They would get like halfway. And so you would see these changes in between the generations, right? The males would become
Behavioral.
yes. So the males would become less territorial. The females would start killing or not caring for their own young. There would be self-harm. Some would undereat, some would overeat, right? There'd be all these weird things. And they track right onto all the issues that humans have as, like a self-domesticated animal.
Well, and that's probably most likely because they were confined to an enclosure.
That's part of it, but it's not all
Because,
of it.
like, for instance,
I don't even think it's primary.
how I can relate to that is I have geese at home.
Yep.
And I got them small shit.
Yep.
So then eventually I got them out of a brooder and I got them outside. Well, I got them in a fenced area outside. The fenced area isn't free ranging.
Right.
The fenced area is the fenced area. Well, I noticed that there was three of these young geese. They're all girls. And the one started to pick at the others. And it was constant, picking the feathers right off of the others.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what is your problem?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to isolate you because you're causing trouble here. Look at it. She doesn't have her feathers anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I did my research, and it's primarily when there's too many animals in the enclosure, in the area, it's like it almost becomes like a nervous habit.
Right. So there's two things there. So Desmond Morris, who wrote some books in the 70s and whatnot, he was a zoologist in London.
Yeah.
He specifically addresses this cage aspect. And we're caged, right? So we cage ourselves. We live in houses,
To a
we travel
degree.
in cars,
To
we
a
shop
degree.
in stores, work in offices, right? To a degree, yes.
And our society really dictates.
Which is why people get mentally healthier when they go for a motorcycle ride, a bike ride, a horse ride, a walk, because it's freeing yourself from the cage. You feel that.
Live off the land.
That is a more extensive version of it, right? But just like riding a motorcycle,
Change your whole
they call it
lifestyle.
wind therapy, right? And it really does help.
It does. I know guys that ride on the weekend, they love it.
Or just going for a walk.
Yeah.
Helps a ton of it.
It's that.
So there's that aspect, but John P. Calhoun's different. He comes to a much different conclusion. And his is that it's a social thing. It's the social interaction. And you can track because they'd have a camera above it, so they just watch the rats interact socially.
Right.
And they can count how long they were interacting socially and with how many and all of this stuff for years, right? Track this. And it changes over the generation.
By the way, they're doing that with us right
Yeah, well, it's really easy with your phones and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And so they're tracking all of this, and what he comes up to is the social velocity. So if you're having a lot of social interactions, but they're light, they're not very deep, significantly psychologically changes, and it changes the next generation, changes the next generation. We have generations that are a lot longer than rats, right? But we're right on track with his predictions, right? He made predictions out to the 2200s. And we're right on.
now. Well, where would he say we are?
Well, he had a prediction specifically around 2026 that the entire world would see this slowing in birth rates, which we're seeing around the world.
Well, maybe he had insight into,
He made that prediction in like the 1980s.
maybe he had insight into immunization.
No, it tracks perfectly with the rats.
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying.
It's just social
I
interaction.
hear what you're saying, but
His point.
that's where my mind goes.
Oh, I get it. We have major health aspects, which I thought all of those and the technology and stuff would throw off his predictions, and they haven't, which is so weird.
Bible said famine, pestilence.
But all of that stuff has happened a bunch of times in history.
Well,
And
not
it
to
hasn't-
this, not
it
to
hasn't
this
been that in the
extent.
world.
If
I'd
you
say it's been
consider,
a larger extent.
if you consider all of mankind, one time in previous history, got to this point that we're getting to now, and God had to basically start over with Noah. Noah was the only one left perfect in his generations, which basically means or meant his genetic makeup. There's a aspect of what's going on right now that is changing the book that's written inside of mankind that God wrote there.
The genes are always changing.
The genes are being changed and manipulated
But now we can purposely change
intentionally.
them. Now it's like some Frankenstein.
They're turning, yes, it's not just, your eye color is changing and your hair color is changing.
Right.
This stuff that they're doing now through these injections, and they're about to go back into it this fall. We're seeing it right now. You've heard about it.
Yes, a little bit.
I heard last night 80 colleges have already mandated that their kids coming in get the jab.
I think they might push it right through the 2024 elections.
I'm certain they will. I'm certain they will.
Right through the
And
Taiwan
we
invasion.
saw all the despair that it caused last round. And can you imagine? They're going to do that to society again. These people are evil.
Well, so a bunch of things to address, but this John P. Calhoun comes to the conclusion
Yeah.
that it's a lack of a meaningful role in life. Now, what ends up happening,
true.
right, over
That's
the
true.
last couple of decades, especially once you get social media and whatnot, and we see suicide rates in kids increase and all this stuff, what's happening? They have many more social interactions, all at a shallower level,
Yeah.
and they are completely replaceable, and their life is meaningless.
They're isolated too.
Yes. And
They have no true
lockdowns
relationships
just
and
drive the society.
friendships.
Yes. And they don't have a meaningful role.
And their parents, quite frankly, in many instances, allow that, have kind of checked out, The
Well, it
computer,
changes by generation. It gets worse by
the
generation.
computer becomes the babysitter, the TV becomes the babysitter.
And so that's what we're seeing, and then people try to escape and stuff, and civilizations go through. Late stage Greece, late stage Rome, late stage Spain, late stage Britain, right? And so same thing in the East, right? They had all their opium dens in China at one time and all this stuff. And we're seeing it with all the drug use here, we're seeing it with the suicide rates, all that type of stuff. So that's the overall context, that's the environment we're in, that we're trying to make a positive impact on.
That's okay. It's like I told Tracy, Tracy, when I was talking to her about the upcoming election. And I was saying, Tracy, there's 3 things we gotta do. We gotta vote on paper. We gotta eliminate the machines. We have to eliminate mail-in voting. And she's sitting in that position. I sent her the paperwork indicating to her she has all the authority as the local clerk to decide what process we're going to use and then bring it to you guys and have you approve that. And where was I going there? But oh my gosh, that one just fell out of my ear. But yeah, talking to Tracy about
I highly doubt anyone's gonna do it.
oh, that's what it was. I said, Tracy,
Someone's gonna pick that fight.
Tracy, it's up to us. I said, it doesn't matter what everybody else does. I said, we know there was bad outcomes from last go round, and there has been, I know it's been going on longer than that. But
I would say for all of human history.
But I would say it doesn't matter. It's up to us to choose this day who we're gonna serve. Are we gonna do it the right way and do everything to the best of our ability? And yeah, once it goes out a year to the next, train depot, they can manipulate it, they can change it.
Yeah.
And the outcome will still be all twisted and chaotic. But we know we've done the right thing. And that's what I pleaded with Tracy. I said, I can't twist your arm, girl. It's you have a choice to make here. And I pray that God helps you understand this. We need to do what's right here in our township.
I see that system getting sorted.
And I'm in contact with Shasta County, California. They're doing it. All of England does it.
Yep.
That's the only system they have in England is paper ballot.
Yeah, I think France does too.
Well, they've decided that's the best way to do it. That's the only way we can keep things secure. Though they've probably changed theirs. But the thing is, it keeps it in the hands of the people. I was watching in England as they were counting ballots. They had all these young people in there. They're like school-age people. Early college and so forth. They were directly involved in the process.
Okay, yeah.
Can you see where that's advantageous?
Yep.
And it's like, we've got something to say in this outcome. And we're here making sure.
Participating.
We're here making sure that was done correctly, done right.
In our society, it's not there.
Well, we can't just give up.
I wouldn't have taken this job if I was just giving up.
I
Not
know.
that I would recommend taking this job.
I know
Okay.
that. I know that. I know. I heard you speak at Terry's that night before you even had it.
Yeah, and the history of modern freedom from the 1100 Charters of Liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've given a speech to the zoning board of appeals about the 1215 Magna Carta and stuff. So, which from that original speech piece of that,
Yeah.
But tackling all these things they're different aspects of an overall cultural problem, right? And so, which part are you tackling? So we messaged me on Facebook about like the fire village, right? Saying that you support fire, but you don't think that a millage should have been done for it because we should have cut somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't agree with increasing taxation.
Just as a blanket statement.
Yeah, we have to back it up.
But I can't cut all of the taxes that you agree with cutting. I can't cut school taxes.
What can we do about that? Let's see, we're going back. We're using that term like that's warming up there in DC. Well, let's circle back.
Sure.
Well, so what can we do? We have to think this through. I have to pray about it as a man of God and let the Lord lead me in this. You don't have that tool at your disposal,
but those are
but you have a great mind. And I can ask the Lord to reveal to you what we can do.
It's school boards and it's state Congress, right? They're different.
Let's go talk to the school board.
But you can't, they're their own elected officials.
It don't matter.
I don't control school boards. I
It
don't
don't
have
matter.
anything, I don't have
go-
anything to do with it.
We could go in there, you and me, as representatives of Dalton Township, and we can go in there and say, listen, here's the pie chart. I don't have children in school and I don't agree with what you're teaching.
Tons of people say that to you.
Well, we keep saying it to them. You know what? And ultimately, they're held accountable. Maybe they won't choose to do the right thing. And if they don't choose to do the right thing, you think they just go scot-free? There's consequences, my man.
There's nothing,
consequences.
there's nothing that they're doing illegal with having school taxes.
It's immoral, unjust. Now
That's heavily debatable if having taxes to support schools is immoral.
when you have a grandmother sitting over there being taxed on her Social Security and then having to pay property tax to this entity over here where she don't even want her kids going to school, it's immoral.
Yeah, but now you're into an anarchist thing, right?
I'm into justice,
But you're
righteousness.
taxation is theft.
It is.
Well, so anarchism. Anarchism isn't going to work.
Anarchism is anarchy is no law. It's lawlessness.
Yeah, you don't.
That's the
You
devil.
don't have a government structure.
That is the devil-inspired way of doing things.
It's not a real
So
thing.
I don't receive that.
It's not a real thing. It's not
I'm
going to work.
not talking about anarchy. I'm talking about lawful. Our country is based on a certain set of
The taxes
laws.
are lawful.
law on imports, not on income.
The laws change.
Yeah. By who and for what reason?
You know the history's all there.
It's by bankers, man. It's by bankers
It's not
trying to
just
rule.
the bankers don't just have a meeting and then say, you know what, we want to change some ordinance in Dalton.
You don't
It's
think
not how
so?
that happens.
You don't think so?
I've never talked to a banker a
You don't-
single time about an ordinance here.
You don't
Not a
think,
single time.
you don't think so? You and I make a decision here in our local jurisdiction that goes totally upstream against what they're doing. Now, when I say there, who am I talking about?
That's the question.
Well, let's take the current situation where DJ Hilson has been sicked on Stephanie Lambert because she was defending and trying to bring an indictment against those that were in Muskegon that were doing unlawful dealings with the last election. She was doing a righteous deed, proving they had a confession by the woman that was doing it. And Nessel, 6 DJ Hilson on Stephanie Lambert.
So you think
And-
the bankers got
and
together, told
It's
Nessel
the
what to
money.
do?
It's
and
the
told
money. It's that you don't do nothing without money in
Money's
this system.
part of it.
No, it's everything.
No, it's
You
not
don't-
everything.
Try to, well.
It is
part-
not everything.
Well, and now here's where
That is where the conspiracy theories go wrong, that they think they have the answer.
It's
They're
everything.
right that they see the problem.
It's everything to them, and that's how they manipulate the world. To us, I totally agree, Jeff.
Not everything.
Jeff, I totally agree with that because I should have qualified that by saying it's everything to them.
It's part.
But in this system,
Germany and
but-
Japan lost World War II because they didn't have enough oil. Oil was important. Oil's not the whole thing.
but in this system, money
Is
is what
important.
is what drives
Important.
what drives their system.
Very important. It's a main piece.
It's what drives their
It's
system.
not everything.
In the economy of God, it's not.
There
It's-
are
money-
ideologically
money
driven
too.
people on that side too.
Money-
The
money.
communists
Yeah.
are ideologically driven to the same extent, and a lot of times in the same way, and there's a decent amount of overlap now, liberation theology and all that type of stuff,
Yeah.
with Christianity.
Well, what my example for that is where the money doesn't drive us, is in the decision we made in regards to food sovereignty. That cost us $0. That cost us nothing. And what we did is we brought freedom back into the community.
Right.
So, yeah, In my economy, money is not what drives everything. In their economy, it's everything.
It's
And you
not.
can't have a war without money. You
You
can't,
can't have war.
you
without-
can't
you-
hire a
you can't-
hitman to take out a leader in a foreign country without money.
You can't survive over the next year without money.
Oh, yeah.
Nor can I.
Oh, yeah.
Money is
I grow food.
money is a representation.
I have animals I can slaughter.
Which
I
is-
have friends with animals that they can slaughter.
which is all convertible into money. Money is a medium of exchange.
Well, but I would live.
It's a medium of exchange and a measuring tool. It is a representation, it's symbolic
Yeah.
of wealth that exists. If you have
But-
money that doesn't symbolize anything you can get, it's no better than this paper towel.
It's tremendous influence and control in their system. And
It represents food. It represents
How much-
housing, it represents clothing.
how much money do you need to get elected president right now?
A lot. Billions.
How much money do you need to get an audience with the president?
But my point,
How much money?
you can't fix that. How would you propose
I would-
fixing that?
I'm at war with it.
But you're at war with the world.
In essence.
You're at war with human nature.
Yes, in essence.
These are not winnable wars.
Baloney.
They're not.
I've already won. I'm more than victorious. I'm living in peace down the road. I'm living in love. I'm living loving my neighbors. I'm already winning. You know, I've already won the war there in regards to this whole thing. But the thing is, I'm also called to take a stand against evil.
Right. That's a very
And-
different aspect.
And going back to Magdeburg, and what I wanted to say
Yeah.
is that you had that opportunity as a lesser magistrate in that chair. Anybody on the food chain has the ability in the government structure to say, hold it, stop it, we're not doing what is right.
Anyone not in the government structure has the same ability. It's
That's-
everyone that has that ability.
That's why I'm here. But
We're all completely free.
Timothy Matt down at the prosecutor's office told me he's not a lesser magistrate. And I want to find out if he's a Freemason. I truly do.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's important to know because I don't know where he's coming from. I perceive him as a very smart man, a decent man, a man who is willing to have conversation.
Sure.
And I so appreciate that. But there's something not right in Denmark. And because he's denying
You
some
got
of
Shakespeare references everything.
he's denying some of the in-your-face
The
truth.
Shakespeare play at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp that was supposed to happen, Richard III, that was supposed to happen at the Rose Theater on Saturday, got canceled because some of the cast is sick.
Oh, I didn't even know they were doing that.
Oh, it's awesome. Have you ever been there?
Well, I've been to Blue Lake.
Have you been to the
For-
theater?
Well, for performance, not for theater.
Well, it's a replica of the original theater that the Shakespearean plays were performed in.
Oh, I would like that. You know what? My wife would love that too.
It's cool.
You know, where I was at was the Stratford Theater in Canada.
Okay, I've never
And
been
the
there.
night I was there, I was just a little shaver and got brought there by my older brother, who was 40 years older than me, and he was a music major, and so was his wife. They loved the performing arts. And we were up in that area at that time, and they found out that Romeo and Juliet was going on at Stratford Theater. So we ran over there. It was amazing. And the Prime Minister of Canada was there that night. He was seated in the front row of the balcony. And it's pretty cool. But yeah, I love that. I love the performing arts.
So, but
And I say, to an extent.
that little Shakespeare reference sent me on that little thing.
All right.
But so there's all of that, right? So I have to work at multiple levels here, right? So because there's the ideological level, then there's the strategic level and the tactical level, because I still have to run a practical, actual organization.
Sure.
It's a lot different than just writing an article saying like what should be. I have to make things be, and I have to keep the wheels rolling on the bus, which in itself is very hard, right? The structure here is, and this in government in general and purposefully, is designed to fight itself. So the organization does not work well, right? The structure is dumb if you want the organization to run well. but we don't, because we want the organization to fight itself, right? And so it just doesn't run smooth, right? There was one point
We know that.
where we didn't pay employee retirement accounts here for 5 months in a row. I found out about it 5 months into us not paying. Right?
How do they keep that?
It's more of a neglect thing, right? It's a negligence thing. It's the clerk is supposed to do it. It was showing up on paychecks, on check stubs.
Yeah.
No one checks their account. I don't check my retirement account, right? And so someone checked it 5 months in, it wasn't through. So it's a huge kerfuffle, right? It's a mess. It's just a practical thing. It has nothing to do with any laws I'm trying to change. None of my philosophy isn't. It's just something that needs to happen. It's important. It's very important, right? Very important. That's ridiculous, right? It's very important, but it's just a practical thing, right? I have to make sure that the maintenance guys are equipped enough to continue cutting the grass at the cemeteries, right? It's nothing that I would never run for an election or take this position because I don't want this as a career to do those things. I wouldn't run it to take care of the sewer debt. I wouldn't take this position to try to take care of the sewer debt, right? I've been taking care of the sewer debt. I wouldn't do it to improve the roads, right? You can run on that forever. I wouldn't take the position because it's like, we need better roads. Wouldn't do it, right? It has to be more foundational about the legal set of laws itself for me, right? That's what I read. Well, all of those other things, I would be neglectful in my duties if I didn't tackle them and try to keep things moving, rolling, working. And when I came in, right, so I said, there's certain things I want to change, right? I want to be more transparent. I want to record and post meetings, right? We did that. I want to release documents, did a ton of that. I want to change the ordinances to be more business and farm friendly. We've been doing that, right?
Good things.
I want to do it in such a way that it doesn't break the system or destabilize society. So I just want to, there's a process in place. I want to do that process and I want to just chop away at things, right, over 4 years and make progress on it. And then there's all of these other things about roads and cemeteries and parks and the building and all the personnel stuff that I will work at as best I can.
It seems to me in regards to ordinances, question, like I said, the question is always why.
Mhm.
Are you serious? Why? Why are we doing this? Scott Christmas brought up something I thought was interesting. When he rebuilt his barn after it had burned down and it had a fire, and he had this now beautiful barn up there. He wanted to put a horse corral out back of the barn. And they told him, no, you can't do that. And he said, well, why? And they said, well, because your barn is so large now, if I understand this correctly, your barn is large enough where the watershed from the barn, which used to go down through the soil, now is being shed off of the roof and it's running into the ditch. Well, that's what the ditch is there for.
Well, you get into very practical problems. So the laws don't just spring out of bankers, right? It's not.
Where do they come from?
People.
It's craziness.
It's people. It's part of the process. So like since I've been in, we've had people that right.
Well, but thinking about that one, where would that have come from? That would have come from some ecological
but think about this.
study done at Michigan State University, and then it would have been
Maybe, probably not. So, like, if in Twin Lake, right, or someone's house that burned down, but it was low sitting. We had all that flooding a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so he built his house way up, and then he built his house on top of us. And so his entire yard just shed all of the water off of his lot, which flowed into the road and all of the neighbors' property.
Oh,
Right? Flooded the neighboring houses. They weren't happy. Flooded the road. They shut down the road. Whoever wanted to drive down that road wasn't happy. Well, so if you have a property that would have a lot of water on it and you just shut it down to your neighbors, is that okay?
there's an issue there for sure.
Right.
How would we solve that?
You would solve it in the ordinances somehow.
Well,
And that's why you have the meetings and the debates and the hearings through the planning commission, then through the board.
it
It's why there's
sounds
this process.
to me like individuals that lived in that area knew there was a high water problem. They knew there was a high water issue to begin with. When they moved in there, maybe not, maybe they were ignorant. But you're moving into an area with a high water table, you're gonna expect flooding. You know, it's gonna happen. And so when this guy tries to protect his interests from flooding, and it creates more of an issue for the neighbors, well, they knew there was gonna be flooding in that area to begin with. I would suggest, don't move there to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, that,
You should have seen the problem coming.
don't move there is reasonable. But
Yeah.
you could just say that for everywhere, because
Well-
you're gonna have problems everywhere.
Well, you know, you
So
have
just
to,
don't be anywhere.
you have to use common sense in all of this.
Well, so, but
And
you're,
you don't just start making laws and rules and codes and regulations for every little item that comes up in the world.
but so your stance is I can flood any neighbor's property as much as I want. They have no recourse.
You think the guy did that intentionally? What was he doing? He was trying to protect his property.
If I hurt someone unintentionally, does it matter if it was intentional or not?
So his option then as well was to move, right? And
Everyone else has
not
the option of moving.
and not improve his situation.
No, it's to
Or-
do some sort of water retention on his own property.
You could do that, or a ditch, a drainage ditch
Possibly the road.
could be dug, and you wouldn't have to affect everybody in the community. You know, there's another creative solution. You go out there with a piece of equipment, dig a ditch.
Well, so my point
Yeah.
is, so how do you address this? So the guy could have retained the water on his property, right? But he says no.
Well, he's evaluating long-term probably. If he built up, that took a lot of financial investment to build up. So he had financial resources. So he was evaluating what would be his best course of action, right? That's what I would do.
Right.
And I would say, well,
So if your best course of action is to hurt someone else, is that
that
fine?
was never his intention. I don't think that was ever his intention.
So if my intentions are super good, but I just accidentally kill a bunch of people, that's okay.
You're going to the extreme.
I am, to make the point that that's how these laws come about, from problems.
Well, yeah, but the laws, changing laws is not the solution.
I didn't invent laws. Laws exist.
Well, there's natural laws. There's God given.
No, when I was born, there were already a bunch of laws. Laws didn't come into existence in the last few years.
No, there's natural laws, laws of nature, all right? Things that are in nature that happen naturally.
Yeah.
All right.
You've been by a rattlesnake, you die.
There's spiritual laws, okay? You're gonna have problems, but there's spiritual laws.
No, I get it. It's a moral set of laws, like, hey, don't murder people.
Well,
Right?
and, you know,
Unless
You're gonna-
unless
you're
someone
gonna
says it's
reap
okay.
what you sow, right?
Yeah.
There's action and reaction is
Yep.
what you would call it.
Yep.
All right, and then there's societal laws,
Yep.
but those were God-given. They were based upon the Ten Commandments originally. It was basically love your neighbor. Love God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. You know, don't do any harm to your neighbor.
Yeah.
Okay? So that was the foundation of the law system that we originally had here in this country. Is if you didn't do any harm to your neighbor intentionally, right? There was no punishment, there was no retribution. Now, maybe in this instance, this man who built up his property and realized that his neighbors are being flooded out and the street was being flooded out. That's obviously not a good scenario to live your life in, right? Every day you go out when it's wet and you're having to drive your vehicle through a small lake you've created in the roadway, and you look at your neighbor's house and they're not happy. You know, they're like, dude.
Many neighbors hate each other.
Well, yeah,
That is probably normal.
they will find reasons, but I'm talking about this man here and what was his responsibility rather than our responsibility to come in and interject some kind of new law. We would hold.
I like the direction you're in. It's
Yeah.
a libertarian direction. I like the libertarian stuff, right? Figure it out. I don't even care what happens, right?
Yeah,
Good luck.
help one another.
Right? So, but the society, our society isn't like that, right? It's a very Wild West take on it, right? Of like, hey, something happened on a ranch, whatever.
You
Right?
deal with it.
Right. If you really want to get the guy, get a posse together, handle it, whatever. Right?
Well, you would bring them before a group of your peers, the marshal would do, decide whether or not there was a crime committed, a harm done, one against another, and then he would pursue that, and then they would bring that individual before a group of his peers.
Theoretically.
No, that's the way it was.
Theoretically.
That's the way it was.
Theoretically, that's how it worked.
His peers would decide whether or
In
not there was
actuality-
harm done intentionally.
In actuality, it was much more chaotic, right? So, but you can just not have laws. What ends up happening is someone takes power. You're in an anarchic state. Someone takes power and implements laws. Whatever gang, mafia, whatever is powerful enough to do it, and then they become the government, right?
No, but
Yes, that's how it works.
in reality, that's what's happening, but that's not the way it should be.
It may not be the way it should be. It's the way it always has been and always will be.
No, it wasn't always that.
When wasn't it like that?
Like I just explained to you, at the foundation of our country, we had a lawful system.
100%. It was that way in the
We had a
beginning of the
system
country.
of laws.
We have laws now.
Now we have a legal system, which is totally different. This is a system that was not here at the foundation of our country. This system that we currently have.
Dalton Township didn't exist at the foundation of the country.
No.
The state of Michigan didn't exist at the foundation of the country.
And so, but it doesn't mean that because they corrupted us here in this township governmentally, that we should be satisfied with that. I'm not satisfied with it. I know better, and I know what's the right way to do it as opposed to what's being done currently. And that's kind of why I'm here. I wield the sword when there's a battle to be fought. I don't wield it all the time just for fun. You know what I mean?
I don't wield it for fun at all.
Well,
I've literally put my life on hold for years
yeah.
to try to fix this problem.
Yeah, I admire you. It's a daunting task to take on that responsibility.
The other thing I was going to do is start a meditation instruction company if I didn't take this role. Because I took this role, I literally put that on pause, and I'll start that probably sometime this next year.
I'll be interested to see how that plays out.
I put it on pause for years, right? Literally trying
That
to
might
take
be
this
a
on.
very affluent business because of what the government's about to do to people. They're going to need some form of outlet.
We'll see how it goes. I mean, I have to practically learn how to run it practically, right? But for the last 18 months, I've a part-time person hired in Argentina. I've worked out a good system on problems I had previously when I just helped friends. But my point is, right, that it'd be very hard to do more than I've done. Now, there are people that dedicate their lives. The founding fathers, a lot of them dedicate their lives, right? And so I'm not doing that. I don't think it's worthwhile. My experience here shows me that it's strongly not worthwhile, right? So, but that doesn't mean I don't have obligations for the next 15 months to do what I can, right? But we're also in a very practical situation. I can't just say the laws are illegitimate, let's forget them. It won't even make a useful difference. There are people that do that. So there are people that take office, right? I could take office and be like, you know what? We're just not going to enforce anything. Just let it become what people do this, right? So I know people that have done this. But I don't think that's a useful take. I think a much more useful take is we are a system of laws that have gone through this process, right? There's a process going all the way back. And so what we need to do is continue to use that process to try to make the system better. That's been my reform movement. That's what I've tried to do, right? And if you don't do it that way, I don't think it will stick because it's not legitimate. You're not making legitimate change.
Well,
If I just say I'm not going to enforce them for 4 years, and then whoever gets in for the next 4 years, they can decide what laws they will enforce, not enforce, whatever.
yeah,
We're just making up.
in relationship to that statement.
You essentially have
To just ignore things. No, you just don't ignore things. You change them in a positive way.
we should try to reform the system.
Yeah, you change them in a positive way. You get those things off the books that make no sense whatsoever. You encourage a community to work well with one another. We're a unit here, right? We live. This is our.
Ideally.
Yeah. Well, I'm I'm a person that sees the cup half full. I'm a person that looks for the good, right? I don't ignore the evil. I know it when I see it, and I will deal with it at point I have to. But the thing is, I am looking to love people, care for people, help people, every way that I can. And that inspires others to do the same.
I've changed my view on some of that since having this job. So I want to help people that want to be helped. Here, right? You can just get hammered by people. You can basically make this job what you want it to be, right? So because if I didn't show up, no one could fire me, right? I can just not do the job, no one can fire me. Or you can tackle it the way I've tackled it and have all sorts of problems. And so you can choose whatever level you want to operate at, essentially, right? But there's no matter what you do on that, you're going to get pushback. You probably get the least pushback if you try to basically not do much. I'm guessing, right?
But you'll be accused of not doing it.
But it won't matter because if you do anything, you'll be accused of whatever.
Right, and that's not anything that should even motivate you. You should not really be concerned about other people's favor because, like you say,
But this ends up becoming an issue. So what you become unconcerned with is the opinion of the people.
No, you always have to have the people's best interest in mind, but you have also understanding that there's some weirdness going on and there's ulterior motives and all of that as well. And that's why when you sat in here yesterday and you had your roundtable meeting,
Rectangular table meeting.
Yeah, and like Lee interjected, well, if we're going to return the money to the people, and he was thinking about the people. He was thinking about, well, who are the people that actually paid in the money originally?
Correct, because shouldn't it go back to them?
Should it go
which is
back
reasonable.
to them, which is a reasonable thought. He's really trying to have the people's best interest at mind. And I thought
I've
that
been
was-
clarity to the lawyer, haven't heard back from them.
Oh,
That'll be complex.
all right. But you did put out a feeler to Stephanie Lambert.
I emailed her today.
That's great, man.
I don't mind doing that type of stuff. I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Well, it's okay. It's okay. We're spreading. And you know what? Sometimes the Lord is going to do things on your behalf that you don't even see coming.
Well, I've experienced that many times.
All right.
Right.
So we have to acknowledge that as well. It's that the only reason I'm here today talking to you is because God wanted me here. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think you and I like each other and so forth. And
I agree.
we have stimulating conversations. But yeah, the only reason I'm here is because God asked me to come here. I know that, and you asked me. And see, God put it on your heart to bring me in here.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I'll have some more of the public meetings and whatnot. But I've had like a debate Jeff on anything, ask Jeff anything, attack Jeff on anything.
I see some of that.
Right? People really aren't interested in that. I think there's a decent amount of keyboard warriors, right? That's a huge thing in our society. I think this is a big part of it. People are comfortable. We are living off the success of the past. Our society is immensely peaceful and prosperous to an extent that people don't acknowledge, they don't realize, and they're not grateful for. I've told tons of people, right? Probably hundreds of people over the last few years, our society is immensely peaceful and prosperous. And I say that, and people look dumbfounded, like I shot them with a stun dart or something.
Because they live in Chicago.
They think about it, no, around here,
Well,
right?
but if you lived in
Everyone.
Chicago, you would say, what?
Chicago is extremely peaceful compared to Eskimo tribes, right? So it's weird. It's weird. Our civilization is immensely peaceful and prosperous, and to a stunning degree if you compare it to human history, and even if you compare it around the world, right? I mean, if you compare us to anywhere in Africa, right?
That's changing rapidly.
We're on a downtrend, but you still have to appreciate our peace and prosperity. And then what has gotten us here, right? The system of laws, the political system, all this type of stuff.
A church on every third corner.
Yeah, I mean, Holton, how many churches do they have? 5 or something for,
The restraint on evil.
Well, so
God's presence in the community.
But what ends up happening is people don't even realize that, don't acknowledge it. They think our society is horrible, extremely violent, and extremely poor.
Because that's their experience.
It's completely wrong,
Oh,
right?
they've created their own dilemma.
Well, they're comparing against the wrong things. They're comparing against an imaginary society that's never existed, that's perfect, that they were sold on TV or something. And so we should preserve a bunch of the parts of our society.
Not me, dude. I grew up in a time where it was not like this.
We're a downtrending society. What you're seeing is our foundations are being eroded.
Yeah.
The peace and prosperity will go with it.
They took prayer out of school. They took Bibles out of schools. You know, they took God out of society. What do you expect? What do you expect's going to happen? Shit's going down the toilet.
You have to have some sort of moral base.
Well, you better have God in it, or you might as well kiss it goodbye. And that's pretty much what's happening.
Right. And so, but people don't realize, so they want to scrap the whole thing. And you see this a huge extent on the left and the right, right? So you're familiar with Saul Alinsky,
Yeah,
right?
that's Hillary Clinton's ego,
Community organizing and stuff, right? And so,
and as well as Barack Obama.
I mean, yeah. And I mean, like I read his stuff, right? And he's like, tear down society through any means necessary, and utopia will just magically arise in its place.
Well, that's the Freemason philosophy in the Phoenix. You know, when you create the chaos, and out of chaos you bring order. That's their whole agenda.
But the world is naturally chaos.
Well,
And so you do have
it was originally chaotic, and God put it in order.
So you do have to bring order, but bringing chaos is very dangerous.
It was in order.
But I've done it here. It's my process, right? So criticize the township to a huge degree, right? Bring in an immense amount of change. I'm bringing in chaos. And then I'm trying to reorder it in a new way that's better.
I would call it chaos. You're bringing in order.
A different order.
Well,
To change from one order to another,
right, currently it's chaotic. And if you bring in common sense, you're bringing in order. You're bringing in the proper way of putting things and doing things. You're not bringing in chaos. You know,
but change is chaotic.
well, change can be chaotic for those who are authors of chaos.
Which is why I've tried to keep it somewhat moderate.
Yeah.
Now, for a politician, right, which I am, I've been aggressive on the change. Compared to my own personality, I've been very moderate on the change, right? So, but I have to go through the processes properly, and I have to change stuff in such a way. So, if a lot of people were very skeptical with me coming in, right? And so when I come in, we make some changes right off the bat. I started in the first meeting, we start working on making changes, right? We make some changes, and the world doesn't fall apart. The society doesn't fall apart,
Imagine that.
right? And then a lot of people that didn't vote for me have told me since then, they're like, I like what you're doing. I wish you would stay in for another 4 years,
Imagine
right? Because I didn't break the system. I'm trying to use the system to go in a different direction that's better.
And they didn't know who you were or what you were up to.
Correct. Well, and they didn't believe me. People still don't believe me. When I told people, since I've been telling people for a long time, I'm not going to run for another 4 years. People don't believe me. They still try to convince me otherwise. And I think some of the people that are against me still don't believe me.
Well, I'm waiting for you
I'm telling you exactly what I'm doing.
I'm waiting for you to put the food sovereignty issue on the ballot.
I think we should tackle it next year.
Well, okay, because people don't know it exists.
And it's dangerous. It is dangerous. We're playing with fire.
Well, Timothy Matt's sitting over there waiting for us to be brought to lawsuit.
For what?
He says, I'm sitting here watching to see what happens with it legally.
Oh, for the food thing?
Yeah.
Oh,
He told me that.
it could, yeah, be a big thing at some point.
Well, yeah, he says, well, I'm wondering, I'm sitting here watching to see how the state's going to react.
We're the tip of the spear.
Well, they probably know about it already, but nothing much has become of it.
Correct.
So when somebody,
Which is what I wanted to happen. I wanted to sit there for a little while.
well, but you know what? They don't know what's become of it.
Yeah.
Because we've seen the roadside stands start popping up. We've seen the guys go back into business that were out of it. Are the guys on River Road, are they back in business?
The farm, Hidden Creek?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they've been.
Oh, well, good.
They settled with the township before I took office.
No. But anyways, I'm seeing some great things happen in our community. they don't know exactly what's going on here.
These are big things to tackle. That's my point. There's a ton to tackle.
Yeah,
There's a ton of practical aspects of just keeping the wheels rolling.
yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's like there's a bunch of small stuff to tackle. There's a bunch of big stuff to tackle. There's a lot, right? And so you have to pick which things you're going to do and what you can possibly succeed at.
Yeah.
And so I can't try to chase down everything because not everything's going to stick,
No.
right? And so I want to circle back around to this. So
Then we're gonna call it quits.
I don't know how long we've been here, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
But so to promote this idea of someone, if they're running for office, it'll be very interesting because I doubt getting someone of that I would approve of to run for supervisor next, right? But because it's not a job I would recommend, right? You're essentially sacrificing yourself if you're going to do it properly. I think if you're going to run it as like a career thing or not work at it very hard or something, I think you're doing it improperly. But like logically for the person's best interest, I think that's a more reasonable way to do it, but I've done it. All right. But so this is extremely dangerous. And you can see Whitmer running on it, right? She runs on this thing if we're going to spend the most money of all time on roads and schools, and I'm going to cut your taxes. It's a delusional thing.
It hadn't happened, had it?
It sells every time. The best work on it is The State by Frederick Bastiat, a 12-page essay from 1848 France. He's part of the French liberal school, back when the liberal school of economics met libertas, liberty, right? Before liberal here means almost the opposite of that. But
Yeah.
so here we basically have the authoritarian left and the authoritarian right, right? No one really for freedom.
Yeah.
And then the libertarians who can't get any traction or any of their stuff together, so they're impractical and they're irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right? And so no good factions. Although hopefully in the presidential election, I would really like to see RFK versus Vivek Ramaswamy, which I've both seen speak at Hillsdale College, but they're not gonna win the game in the primary, I'm guessing. So, but
It's like Donna Brandenburg in the state governorship.
yeah,
She should have won.
Stood no
Hands
chance.
down.
stood no chance from the beginning.
Well,
So,
even so.
But my point is this idea of promoting that the state is going to cut and spend more is a thing that sells. It sells in campaigns. It always has. It always will. You can trick the people every time.
Right.
There are people that have been mayors of cities for decades and whatnot, and they sell the same thing every time. And it's extremely dangerous to put yourself in a position where you have to live up to obligations that you don't know how you're going to do them. So I did not do that, right? I said, I'm going to make this stuff transparent. I've done it. We're going to change ordinances to ease up on this stuff.
Yeah.
I've done it.
Don't offer them
Right.
don't offer them a birthday cake. Offer them cuts.
But
On
practical
roads.
cuts. So when we were talking
Yeah.
about the fire thing, I asked you, well, where would you cut?
Yeah.
And you said roads.
Roads.
I think it's reasonable. I think it's extremely reasonable to disagree with that.
Well, my car was going down Staple Road and Riley Thompson just fine before they resurfaced that stuff. You know what? I wasn't having a big issue. I mean, it looks pretty now, and now they got White Lake Drive done. And whoa, man, what are they going to put curbs? Somebody was telling me they're going to put curbs in over there. I said, yeah. What? They got so much money running around right now, they don't know what to do with, and that's the problem. They're trying to spend it all before they lose it. And that all came down through ARPA and COVID. You can see it.
I'm not sure. I think you're seeing things.
Look
Some
at the
things.
school. Look at the work in the schools that's going on around the area right now. $32 million in Muskegon in the junior high.
I'm not sure.
32 million.
I'm
I
not
went
sure.
past Fruitport School. They got every building out there in Fruitport torn
I'm
down
not
and
sure if
renovated.
the county road commission has gotten any of the ARPA funds yet.
I guarantee you they have.
They were supposed to.
Every governmental entity across the United States
Last I knew,
was offered the big bucks.
it was held up at the state level.
Well, that's because they accomplished what they wanted to do. And then they say, oh, I'm sorry, we got to turn the valve off. So they did what they wanted to do. They accomplished it. And they offered you, the little tempter here in order to get you to comply with it, to do it. So then they shut it off and they restructure, they got their other aspects that the WEF and the WHO and everything else are getting the one world government all lined up. And then throwing chaos back at them again. You're constantly working on these poor
But these
individuals.
are different groups that are also fighting each other. It's not just a little cabal that's all in agreement and controls everything.
You don't think?
No, there's a bunch of cabals that are shifting.
How are you going to bring a one world government together with a one world leader? How are you going to do that?
Everyone.
You don't think that's going to happen?
Do you think Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great or Napoleon or Caesar didn't want to conquer the world? They did.
You don't think that?
Do you think they succeeded? They didn't.
When that happened,
People sometimes don't succeed.
Jeff, when that happened, let's talk.
It'll be after us.
Uh,
100%.
uh,
100%. Your time frame's too short.
hey, you know, I mentioned AI in the meeting the other day.
Yep.
It's running the show right now.
AI is very powerful, very dangerous.
It's running the show, and it don't give a hoot about you or about me. It's a machine,
Correct.
you know. And they're putting in the information, best case scenario for what they want to accomplish. There's a book written on the Maui fire that came out on the 10th, and the fire started on the 8th, and the book was written and published and being sold.
Don't get along.
How do you do that?
This is one of the main things the conspiracy theories get wrong. They think all people don't get along except for the major world leaders, which agree on 100% of things.
Not 100%.
That's not how that works.
The final goal, but they're all vying for the top spot.
Correct.
Right.
Which means a lot of them are enemies.
Well, they're
And a lot of them are frenemies.
they're doing each other in, but they're taking advantage of one another. But
Correct.
they have the same goal in mind because they have
They have different goals.
they don't because they have a leader already.
They have different goals.
His name is Satan, and you see how that works.
They have different goals.
He's the one that's in control of them, and so he's calling the shots. They may think they're calling the shots, but ultimately, many of them know Lucifer is their god, and so they're getting direction from Lucifer. All right, so they've already been organized in that regard. You know, and you would say, well, man, yeah, these liberals, man, they seem more organized than the conservatives. You know, they're getting things done. They're accomplishing stuff. Well, that's because he's the ruler of this world. Satan is a little g of this world. And
But they're both fighting for the same thing. The conservatives and the liberals, to a large extent, are both attempting to tear down.
they're using the same tactics.
It's much easier to knock down a stack of blocks than it is to stack the stack of blocks.
In the current government structure, they are using the same tactics. I would agree. The Republicans, who they call themselves.
Well, and they're in the
Conservatives.
foundational philosophy. So even the church is losing its philosophical base to communism to a large extent. Liberation theology is usually what it's known as.
But the church will never change. The true church will never change.
Yeah, but the true, right, of who is actually included and who's not included is a huge disagreement issue.
Well, and it always will be.
And always will be. Right? And so, but my point is, it is not just a few people that get together and agree on everything. So if you have the groups that get together at DeVos and Bilderberg and this type of stuff,
Yeah.
it's like we were talking before this about the supervisors meeting, right?
Yeah.
So the supervisors get together. We don't have a cabal on how we're going to run the different townships and align our ordinances and stuff. No, we're all over the place philosophically on a political spectrum. We get together, we encounter a lot of the same problems. We're very civil with each other. We don't have power over each other, so we have no reason to really debate it.
But you have an organization over you, a corporation over you that has put checks and balances and limitations
Correct.
on what you can even do, and you acknowledge that. And so
We are
really,
created by the state.
really all the majority of individuals in these positions are just spewing, what's being orchestrated up above them, and
But that's not really what. So that happens to some extent.
sure,
It happens to some extent, but it's not the way that you present it. It's not the way that you say it. It's not just how it happens, right? Like, my talking points today would not be approved of any organization that I know of,
no.
right? There's no possible, I don't think there's any organization in the world that would just be like, oh, that video Jeff shot, that was a really good one. We agree with all that stuff.
But
Right.
when you sit in the chair, it changes.
when I sit in the chair, I don't just have the open discussion. I'm running a meeting with specific agenda items. Right? And so, I mean, it would be really weird for me to have this conversation in just the middle of a meeting. Why?
And even because you would get the true opinion and desire of the community. Black's Law keeps them in a state of stupor. They sit there and they watch you guys talk about what affects their lives, and they have no say-so until you give them 3 minutes over here at the lectern, and they have to rush through their point, and they're not used to public speaking. They don't even feel comfortable in the atmosphere, the environment. There's something restricting them when they come in here.
But that's their own problem. They can come and meet and shoot a video like this with me just as much as you can.
Well,
You're the only one that's wanted to.
you know,
We have 10,000 people. You're the only one.
yeah, 90, 95 or 600.
9,427 at one point, but there's deaths and births and stuff.
Yeah, I checked it the other day. But we could probably end the video, but I can talk a little bit longer. We're not here.
Yeah.
Well, what did we got? No, we're all right because I don't put my kids to bed at
7:42.
until 8:30. I was sitting out there.
Okay.
I was sitting out there yesterday in the backyard. It was yesterday. Went out in the morning, let them out. I go out about 8:30 in the morning. I let them out. I let out my geese, let out my ducks, let out my chickens. I free range. I'm stupid. There we go. I told you this at that meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
That fox came right out of nowhere and was trying to kill a chicken right in front of me. I'm like, gosh.
Yep.
The natural law is in effect.
Okay, that's how it works. Well, but you're dealing with a lot like that in human nature and the structure of the organizations, social relations. You're dealing with a lot of the same limitations. You're also dealing with the real history, right? So that's so the state creates the local municipalities. And you still get people elected and stuff, but they can't just override state law. The state legislator can override our local laws.
Well, in regards to the creating it, they approve the creation of it.
Correct.
They don't individually, they don't come and create it. It's the people of the community that decide they need some kind of leadership within the community to accomplish certain aspects of life.
Correct. So they still pick the people, but like the laws of the township existing itself and how we're structured and that type of stuff, it's state law.
Well,
Right? I would make the case, a lot of people disagree with me on this.
and that's morphing continually.
It is.
Changing constantly.
Because there's a process in place for it. Now,
And there's a direction that they're moving in.
but there's a fight over it too. It's not just a peer direction. It's a continual fight. Now, I would say in our views, generally, where we agree on stuff, it's moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
In general, right? So, but it's like we can get involved in the process, right? I think I would have a legitimate chance at running for and winning state rep, right? I'm not going to do it because I don't think it's worth. I have to run for a year, then I have to onboard for a year, run for another year. Then if I get elected, I got 2 years to maybe get a couple of laws passed to try to make some sort of change, right? I don't think it's worth it.
And isn't that something, man, that the whole agenda of that particular group is to make a law?
That's what it is.
Make another law. How counterproductive is that?
Well, but what you're doing is you're proposing an entire different structure of the civilization itself.
Go back to the way things were.
The way things were when.
Well, we're going in a circle here. But anyways.
Right? Because that's the issue with like the term conservative. Conserve what? Right? Are you conserving the 1980s? Are you conserving the 1780s? Like what are we conserving?
We would have to look at the actual meaning of that word, but yeah. Yeah, what
Right.
how do you describe
300 BC?
how do you describe a conservative? Yeah.
Right? So you have to define the actual content of what you're shooting for. But so I think it'd be very reasonable to structure a society where the smallest unit of government, and it's actually this is big in Catholic social teaching, right? The idea of subsidiarity, so that the smallest government has as much power as it can possibly use in a good way, useful way. And then you only go up, you only bring the power higher if it's needed to the minimal extent, right? And so that you would have a local elected government, and then people from that local elected government would choose the higher government and so forth, right? And then the smaller government would have the most authority. Our society is not structured like that. I make the case that the state is the primary unit of government. The states decided to create the federal government, right? And that's part of the Articles of Confederation and then later the Constitution.
Yes.
And the states decided to create the smaller municipalities within them, right? So we don't fully operate off of a pure idea of subsidiarity, but a version of it.
Well, originally there were towns, local towns. They had their own government structure. They had a sheriff, they had a clerk. And even before the state was actually formed.
You can make the case for it.
Yeah, that's the way it was. So I would say, the smallest entity is what's most important to us here in this community. We know our community better than anybody. Why on earth should we be conducting ourselves the way they do in Detroit? There's no reason for that one.
I agree. Well, and I've had people present it. One of the guys that ended up resigning from the planning commission, because I made some changes in personnel in the planning commission and zoning board of appeals, because I wanted to get the ball rolling with changing things, right? And I tried to have exit interviews with the people that were leaving and stuff, and a lot of stories. We got a bunch of different ways that way. But the one guy, he hadn't attended meetings for quite a while, personal reasons, whatever. And so eventually, I think it's on the zoning board of appeals, he eventually made a meeting. I think he'd been out like maybe 6 months, something like that, and came back in and he's like, oh, like some changes have been being made. I wasn't aware. And it's like, yep, some changes are being made. Been talking about that for like 18 months before he took office, something like that. And then the entire time I've been in office, everything's public and recording the meetings and posting packets. Like the information's there. I don't know how you missed, right? And I tried to have meetings with everyone when I come in, right, or that early time, but he wasn't able to meet or whatever. And then, his case was, we had a phone conversation, and his case was that our laws and how we operate our policies should be just like the city of Muskegon, right? And it was like, I disagree with that, right? It's
kind of ridiculous.
It is pretty ridiculous. And so, which the case I made, and since I thought that was ridiculous, then he ended up resigning.
I just found out from somebody that Lakewood Club has their own jurisdiction over there.
Correct.
They have their own set of rules and laws.
They're a village.
They're a village.
Inside of the township.
You can't have chickens over there in the village.
They have their own zoning ordinances, all their own ordinances. Yep. So, in the county, there's about 174,000 people. There's 16 townships, 7 cities, and 4 villages. One of the villages is there. Twin Lake, a lot of people think is a village. It's not. It's an unincorporated census-taking area wholly contained within the township of Dalton. It's essentially just a spot with a name, right? But the village has their own elected council. So there's a president of the village. There's their own trustees. They have their own clerk, their own treasurer. They don't run their own elections. So their elections are done by the township. But they have their own Department of Public Works that takes care of the roads. We don't, right? We have the county does our roads. The village is different on that. They have their own planning commission for their own zoning and stuff. So they are their own legal entity. Yeah.
Yeah, he said he had to pay taxes here and taxes there.
That is correct. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep.
That's redundant.
It is, but it gets down to the idea of subsidiarity, that small representation. Because the village is, right, we have almost 10,000 people. The village only has like 1,300 people, something
Well,
like
then
that.
they should only be dealing with taxation in their village, not having to dole out extra money to the township. If they're handling their own affairs, why are we siphoning off some of their cash?
Well, you can make that case. You just have to change state law.
Well, there we go, right back to who's the dirty dog in the equation.
The federal and state
The
legislators,
bloodsucker at the top.
the federal and state legislators, in reality, in our political system, hold the power. Now, what has happened, especially with the administrative state, right, is they have dispersed that power on purpose, but they can take it back anytime they want.
Oh, imagine.
They can override our zoning anytime they want,
Oh, imagine.
right? But the state legislator and the federal legislator has become a career for politicians.
Yeah.
right? And I
And
can
the affluent.
I can feel it. I can feel it because, I probably have the capacity to make a career as a politician, right? Or the ability, right? I don't think I have the internal capacity because I can feel it doesn't feel good, right? Like your mind would become warped because of the weird perspective you have and the weird feedback mechanisms. It's not good to have career politicians. It is not good.
No, and it's not good to have pastors in the pulpit that are getting paid.
Well, yeah, the church. Well, I mean, ever since the Reformation, the church keeps splitting and splitting and splitting and splitting, and it's very interesting because it's becoming very personality focused on individual pastors, right? So that's a whole separate issue. I have a bunch of views on religion and whatnot. So, but the church is going through interesting major problems right now.
And that's good. No more fence sitting, get off the fence. But God is doing that right now. He's separating the wheat from the tares. A lot of people are playing games. They have religion, but they don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
They, I look at different families, and I can see this concept. You have a man of God or a woman of God who's very relationship oriented. Jesus Christ is the center of their life. They conduct their life. Everything revolves around Him. They don't take credit for what's being accomplished in their lives. They know that the Lord is at work in their life. Their children see that, and they grow up thinking, well, they've got all these high expectations and moral standards. They don't have their own relationship with Christ. They may come into a religious activity and be involved in the church and be required to be there, but really there's no power in their life to change anything in regards to that. And then the third generation comes along and they see the hypocritical nature of their parents. They don't want to have nothing to do with it, but then the cycle repeats.
Right.
Because now you have a total anarchist. His life is totally trashed. There's no value, and he even is understanding it.
I've seen that cycle.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's the way things go as I observe them. But, hey, it's been good talking.
Yeah, I know you got other stuff to get to. Was there anything else you wanted to hit on?
No.
And we've had quite the range, as we do.
Yeah. If anybody's watching this, we probably tired them out a lot. So,
this is how almost all my conversations go.
well,
Just in life.
that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah.
I could care less, politics, and, to show. And,
Panem et circenses, bread and circuses, right? The old Roman phrase,
yeah,
found to keep the population in line.
entertained.
Essentially comfort, right? With like food and that type of stuff. So comfort and distraction.
Yeah, distraction. Sporting events,
Celebrities.
celebrities. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's craziness, but yep. But God is doing good things here in Dalton Township. And you're part of that process for sure. And I'm thankful for you.
It's an adventure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to write an article soon on successes, failures in the future. And so, because a lot of the stuff I said I was going to do, I've done, right? So a lot of successes as far as practical stuff goes there. I have failed to get the organization to work well, right? And there's just practical problems with that, and I understand what they are with the structure and whatnot, and they can't be fixed largely because of the way the structure is set up by state law. And in the future, there's a lot of unknown, right? Like I know what I'm doing personally, so I'll mention that in there. But the future of the township largely lays in the hands of who decides to get involved and participate, right? Who's gonna get elected? And if someone's getting elected for career concerns, then that gives me hesitations. If someone is getting elected for ideological concerns, then that can either be good or bad. So, but I'll write that at some point in the near future. So.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate it.
Yep.
I will stop the video.
All right.
A lot of material in there.
You got a brownie, take it home.
If anyone else wants to have debate, talk, whatever, something like this, let me know. But I've offered it a bunch of times. You're the only one.